Welcome, traveler. Before we step back into the distant world of the Vikings, take a moment to settle yourself. Find a comfortable place, let your shoulders ease, and let your breath fall into a natural rhythm. You are here not to rush, not to strain, but to drift gently into a calmer state of mind. As you listen, I'd like to invite you into a small ritual of connection. Look down at the comments and share with us the time where you are and the place from which you are listening. Perhaps it is late at night or early in the quiet morning. Perhaps you are listening from a far corner of the world or somewhere familiar and close. Those simple words of your time, your place, will linger as part of the shared journey we are taking tonight. Now, let your mind travel back, centuries upon centuries, into a harsher, slower, and far more demanding age. You may have heard stories of the Vikings as fierce raiders, explorers, or heroes from legend. But if you truly lived in their world, you would find something far more challenging. A life shaped by hunger, cold, endless work, and constant struggle against the forces of nature. And so we begin, not with ships or battles, but with the quiet, ordinary rhythm of daily existence. For it is here, in the smallest details, that survival itself was most fragile. Imagine opening your eyes in the half-dark of a Viking longhouse. The smell of smoke lingers thick in the air, a reminder of the fire that burned all through the night. There is no chimney, so the smoke curls and settles in the rafters, darkening the beams above. Your body is stiff from sleeping on a straw mattress laid across the packed earth. The woolen blanket is rough. Its fibers scratch gently against your skin. You are not alone. Around you, family members stir slowly, rising from their beds of straw. The sound of coughing mixes with the low bleating of sheep or goats kept inside for warmth. Animals live under the same roof as people, not out of choice but necessity, their body heat helping to fight the bitter cold. The day begins early, for there is no luxury in waiting for comfort. Someone rises to coax the embers back into flame, feeding the fire with dry twigs and careful breath. The room grows warmer, but only slightly. You are always aware of the chill of the damp air seeping through the wooden walls and earthen floor. Breakfast is not indulgent. A crust of coarse barley bread, perhaps softened in milk if there is any to spare. A thin porridge of oats, flavored with nothing more than salt. If the household is fortunate, there may be butter or dried fish saved from earlier days. But more often, food is functional, never abundant. Outside, the village stirs to life. Smoke rises from neighboring houses, and the voices of others echo faintly across the open air. Life here is not private, it is communal. Everyone sees, everyone knows, for survival is not possible without shared labor. This daily rhythm was the foundation of Viking life. It was not glamorous, nor romantic, but relentless. Each task carried weight, because failing to complete it might mean hunger or cold in the weeks ahead. Farming the hard northern soil required patience and strength. Wooden ploughs pulled by oxen turned the earth, but the fields were never generous. The short growing seasons left little margin for error. If the harvest failed, the entire community would suffer through a lean winter. Women worked constantly, though their labor was often unseen in the sagas and stories. They maintained the household, weaving wool into heavy cloth, preserving fish and meat, and managing food stores with the precision of survival. Children fetched water from the stream, gathered firewood, and carried out the small tasks that built discipline into their earliest years. The longhouse itself was more than a dwelling. It was a place of endurance. Smoke blackened the walls. Illness spread quickly in the damp, and the air was always heavy. Yet it was also a place of warmth and unity. a shelter against the long nights when snow piled outside and storms battered the coast. To live in this world meant never knowing rest in the way we understand it today. There were no weekends, no evenings of leisure, no easy comforts. There was only the rhythm of necessity. And already, in the ordinary fabric of daily life, you can sense why survival in the Viking Age would have tested you to the very limits of endurance. Now, picture yourself seated inside the longhouse once more. The fire crackles softly, but its warmth fades the moment you step away from the hearth. Before you is a wooden bowl filled with a simple meal, thick porridge made from barley or oats, seasoned only with salt or a scattering of herbs gathered in summer. The taste is plain, almost bland, yet each spoonful carries weight, for it may be the only meal you will have until evening. The air carries the faint aroma of dried fish, hung from the rafters weeks earlier, its sharp salt taint cutting through the smoke of the fire. Meat, when it appears, is reserved for special days, perhaps goat or pork, boiled into a thin stew and shared among the entire household. More often, you eat bread baked from coarse barley flour, so dense and gritty that it wears against your teeth. Milk from cows or goats is treasured, though it spoils quickly without salt or fermenting. Butter is rare, cheese even rarer, and both must be carefully preserved for leaner times. Ale, weak and cloudy, is often safer than water from the streams, and so it fills your cup as an everyday drink. The meals are not feasts, they are sustenance. They are quiet, functional pauses in the cycle of labor, eaten quickly before the next task begins. Food in the Viking world was never guaranteed. The short northern summers allowed for only a narrow window of farming, and the soil itself was thin and stony. A poor harvest meant hunger, and a harsh winter could stretch supplies to their breaking point. Families relied on storing dried fish, salted meats, and hard cheese. Yet even these could dwindle too soon. Grain must be carefully rationed, for it was not only food, but also seed for the next year's planting. To eat too much in one season could mean famine in the next. Fishing was vital, but it carried risks. Men rowed out in small boats across cold, unpredictable seas, trusting nets and luck to provide enough for the village. Some turned to hunting, deer, elk, or boar, but wildlife was scarce and the forests unforgiving. Even in times of relative abundance, meals were repetitive, lacking the variety and richness that we might expect today. Spices were rare luxuries, honey a rare sweetness, and fruit or vegetables limited to what could be grown or made nearby. Imagine enduring winter after winter, with daylight fading early and snow burying the earth. Each meal is a careful measure, each bite taken with the knowledge that what is eaten today may not be replaced tomorrow. Hunger is not a passing discomfort, but a companion, an invisible shadow pressing close, reminding you of how fragile survival truly is. And so, while stories of Vikings often speak of banquets and mead halls, the truth is that most of their lives were shaped not by plenty, but by the constant struggle to keep hunger at bay. The night has fallen, and the Viking longhouse is cloaked in silence. The fire in the hearth burns low, casting a faint orange glow across the darkened beams above. Families huddled together beneath woolen blankets, the rhythmic breathing of children mingling with the low crackle of embers. Outside, the wind sweeps across the settlement, carrying the salt of the nearby sea and the creak of trees swaying in the dark. Yet, in this stillness, there is no sense of true safety. Every Viking community lived with the knowledge that danger might arrive at any moment. Not from wild animals or storms, but from other men. Just as the Vikings set sail across distant seas to raid the shores of Britain or Francia, so too could neighboring clans or rival settlements descend upon them. Imagine lying awake, straining your ears at the faintest sound outside the longhouse walls. A dog barks in the distance. The crunch of feet on frozen earth might be nothing more than neighbors returning home. More, it could be the first sign of an attack. A raid in the Viking world was swift and brutal. Strangers could arrive under the cover of darkness, carrying torches, axes, and the intent to take whatever they could find. There was little warning, little chance to prepare. Women, children, elders, all were vulnerable in these moments, with only the strongest men to defend them. And even then, the odds were often uncertain. The fear of such raids was woven into daily life. Just as they lived by raiding, so too did they live with the expectation that they could one day be the victims of it. And so, every night in the Viking world was marked by a subtle unease. The awareness that peace was always temporary and safety always fragile. The Viking Age is often remembered for its outward expansion, for ships landing on foreign shores, for villages across Europe trembling at the sight of longships on the horizon. But within Scandinavia itself, life was marked by constant rivalry. Clans and chieftains clashed over land, resources, and honor. There were no strong kingdoms to enforce order, only shifting alliances, temporary peace, and the ever-present possibility of conflict. Raiding was not simply a matter of greed. It was a survival strategy. A poor harvest, a failed fishing season, or a dwindling food store could push men to take what they needed from others. Raids provided wealth in the form of livestock, grain, and even slaves. They also brought prestige to those who led them. A chieftain who failed to secure riches might lose the loyalty of his followers. But the cost of this system was insecurity. To live as a Viking was to accept that your home might not always be yours, your fields not always safe, your family not always protected. Even those who lived far from the coast were not beyond reach. Rivers carried longships deep into the heart of Europe, and land routes allowed rival clans to march across fields and forests. The psychological toll was immense. Imagine waking each day knowing that survival did not only depend on the harvest, the weather, or the sea, but also on the intentions of men beyond your horizon. Imagine raising children in a world where violence was not distant, but immediate and possible at any time. This was not a world of stability or certainty. It was a world where vigilance was constant, and where peace, when it came, was never more than a fragile pause between storms. And so, even if you endured the long winters and the hunger, even if you managed the labor of farming and fishing, you would still face this deeper reality. Life as a Viking was lived under the shadow of fear, a shadow that never truly lifted. Imagine yourself stepping onto the deck of a Viking longship. The air is crisp and briny, carrying the endless scent of salt water. Beneath your feet, the wooden planks creak and shift as the boat rocks gently against the current. Around you, men settle into their places along the oars, their hands already blistered from long days of rowing. The longship is narrow and shallow, built for speed, not comfort. There is no cabin, no shelter. Every man aboard is exposed to the elements. When the sun rises, its light beats down without mercy. When the rain falls, it soaks through wool and leather until every garment clings cold and damp against the skin. At night, you lie where you sit, wrapped in a cloak that offers little against the northern chill. The deck beneath you hard and unyielding. The sea itself is alive. Waves rise and fall, with a rhythm both soothing and threatening. The sound of oars dipping into the water creates a steady beat, a kind of endless chant that lulls the mind into a trance. Yet beyond that rhythm lies uncertainty. A sudden change in the wind, a shift in the tide, or the dark shadow of an approaching storm could turn the sea from ally to enemy in moments. There are no maps as we know them, only memory and instinct. Navigation depends on the stars at night, the shape of the coastlines, the flight of birds, and the color of the water. A wrong turn can mean days adrift, with food and fresh water running dangerously low. On calmer days, there is still little comfort. Meals are sparse. Dried fish, hard bread, or whatever provisions could be carried aboard. The air grows heavy with the mingled sense of salt, sweat, and damp wool. Men shift uncomfortably, stretching weary muscles between long bouts of rowing. As the journey drags on, you feel the fatigue sink deeper. Your body aches, your skin cracks from the salt, your eyes burn from the constant reflection of light on water. Yet there is no relief. The voyage continues because the sea does not care for the suffering of men. It offers only its vast, indifferent expanse. To modern eyes, the Viking longship is a marvel of engineering, sleek, swift, and capable of carrying men across oceans. But to those who lived aboard them, the longship was also a test of endurance. The very design that allowed them to raid distant shores also demanded sacrifice from those who rowed and sailed them. Journeys across the North Sea or along the coasts of Britain could stretch for weeks. Longer voyages to Iceland, Greenland, or even Vinland carried men beyond familiar waters into the unknown. Each mile brought not only hope of new land or plunder, but also greater risk of never returning home. Storms were constant threats. A single surge of waves could swamp a ship, scattering men and provisions into the sea. Hypothermia was silent and swift. Salt water stung wounds, inflamed skin, and made thirst unbearable. And yet, voyages were not optional. They were a necessity for trade, for survival, for the expansion of families and communities pressed tight against the limits of their own land. There is also the silence of the sea. Days could pass without sight of land, the horizon an unbroken line of grey-blue. In such stillness, the mind wanders, and men faced not only physical hardship, but also the quiet strain of uncertainty. Would they find safe harbor? Would their provisions last? Would they ever see the fires of their home longhouse again? Imagine yourself in their place, days upon days on open water, the wind against your face, your muscles aching, your body weary, your spirit stretched thin. This was the price of being a Viking, the cost hidden behind tales of discovery and conquest. And for most of us today, accustomed to safety, comfort, and stability, such a life upon the sea would not only be unbearable, it would be unlivable. Picture yourself at dawn in a Viking settlement. A thin mist lingers over the fields, curling around the rough wooden fences and drifting slowly through the trees. The air is still, save for the distant call of birds waking with the morning light. You walk with the community toward a clearing near the edge of the forest, where a small group gathers quietly around a raised altar of stone and wood. The air smells of damp soil, pine, and faint smoke from torches held in the hands of those assembled. The sound of footsteps crunching on frosted ground mingles with the soft murmur of prayers spoken under breath. No one here thinks of the gods as distant. Odin, Thor, Freya, they are near, their presence woven into every moment of life. The ritual is simple, yet profound. An offering is made. Grain, mead, or perhaps the sacrifice of a goat or a sheep. Not done with cruelty, but with solemn care. For it is believed that such gifts sustain the balance between mortals and gods. The blood is sprinkled upon the altar, the bones left for the earth, the meat shared among those present. Around you, the people stand in reverent silence. Some close their eyes, whispering their hopes for a bountiful harvest, safe journeys, or protection in times of war. Others gaze toward the sky, waiting for signs a bird flying overhead, a shift in the wind that might carry meaning. The moment is not theatrical, not grand, but steady and intimate. This is faith in the Viking world, woven into the soil, into the seasons, into every hardship and every fleeting joy. For the Vikings, life was never free from the weight of destiny. They lived with a deep belief in word, the shaping of fate, a force beyond human control. Even the gods, powerful as they were not free from their destined end at Ragnarok, the final battle when the world itself would fall into ruin. This belief did not bring comfort in the way some modern faiths do. It brought acceptance, a recognition that struggle, suffering, and even death were inevitable. To live was to endure what fate had already written, to face it with courage rather than resistance. Imagine carrying such knowledge daily, every voyage across the sea, every walk into the forest, every harvest sown into the soil was shadowed by the sense that your life was already woven into a tapestry beyond your control. There was strength in this worldview, but also heaviness. Rituals helped maintain balance. Seasonal sacrifices marked the turning of the year. Winter feasts to survive the long dark, midsummer celebrations to honor the light. Each gathering was both practical and sacred, a reminder that survival was not only a matter of labor, but of harmony with unseen forces. But this harmony came at a cost. The fear of displeasing the gods was real. A failed harvest, a lost ship, an outbreak of illness any might be seen as punishment or neglect. People carried not only their own burdens, but also the weight of keeping their household, their clan, in the favor of the divine. For modern minds, such constant awareness of fate, ritual, and unseen judgment would feel heavy indeed. Yet, for the Vikings, it was the rhythm of life itself, as natural as the rising of the sun and the setting of the moon. Immersion into a Viking hall, it is evening, and the longhouse glows with firelight. The heavy timber walls, darkened by years of smoke, seem to breathe with the flicker of flames. The roof is high and steep, its rafters filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasted meat. At the far end of the hall sits the chieftain, draped in fine furs, a silver arm ring gleaming faintly on his wrist. His presence fills the room with quiet authority. The benches along the walls are crowded with free farmers, craftsmen, and warriors. Some wear modest wool tunics, patched and restitched, their hands rough from labor. Others wear cloaks dyed with rare colors, tokens of trade, proof of wealth and standing. The air hums with conversation, the low murmur of deals struck, disputes settled, and tales told to pass the long night. But beneath this warmth lies division. At the very edges of the hall, standing apart from the fire's glow, are thralls the enslaved. Their clothes are plain, their faces shadowed, their tasks endless. They serve the food, fetch the drink, clean the scraps from the floor. Their voices are not raised in debate, their opinions never sought. They belong to the hall, but not as equals. Imagine yourself seated among them, not as a noble or a warrior, but as one of those who must toil. You would not eat first. You would not be honored in stories. Your survival would be tethered entirely to the will of another. Your fate sealed not by your own deeds, but by the social order into which you were bound. The whole seems warm and full of life, yet its glow hides the sharp edges of inequality. Viking society was not a flat world of warriors and explorers, as popular stories sometimes suggest. It was tiered and rigid, a structure that dictated one's opportunities and chances of survival. At the top were the Jarlis nobles who controlled land, wealth, and influence. Below them, the carls, free farmers, and craftsmen who formed the backbone of Viking society. And at the bottom, the thralls, enslaved men and women, often taken in raids or born into servitude, their freedom stripped away. For a thrall, life was labor without choice. They tilled fields that were not theirs, tended fires they did not benefit from, and raised children who would inherit their same fate. They could be bought, sold, or traded as easily as livestock. Their names were often lost to history, their lives unrecorded. Even for free men and women, life was shaped by standing. A farmer who lost his land might slip into debt, his survival hanging by the generosity or demands of a chieftain. A craftsman who failed to secure good trade might find himself vulnerable to hunger when winters grew long. To survive as a Viking, it was not enough to be strong or skilled. You needed status, allies, and favor. Without them, the longhouse fire might warm you for a night, but it would never secure your place in the story of your people. And so, beneath the adventurous tales of voyages and raids, Viking life was marked by quiet inequality, an unseen struggle for recognition. A constant reminder that survival was not distributed equally among all. The night feels cool, and the salty air tingles on your lips as you stand on the deck of a longship. The vessel creaks and groans, every timber soaked with the memory of past voyages. Above you, the sail swells with the wind. A square of wool dyed deep red, catching the faint light of the moon. The sea stretches in all directions, endless and unknowable. The stars are your only guide, flickering silently in the dark heavens. The men around you row in rhythm, their oars slicing the water with a steady splash, a heartbeat of survival echoing across the waves. The sound is hypnotic, yet beneath it lies unease. Every wave feels like a test. The longship rides low, its shallow keel perfect for rivers and coasts, but fragile against the fury of the open sea. The wind shifts suddenly and the ship lurches, sending a spray of icy water across your face. The cold bites deeply, soaking your tunic, chilling you to the bone. The voyage stretches on, day after day. Food is dry and meager, hardtack, dried fish, and whatever ale or water has not yet spoiled. You cannot escape the smell of wet wool and tar, or the constant rocking that never ceases, day or night. Sleep comes lightly, stolen in fragments beneath the stars, interrupted by the cry of a lookout, or the sudden change of weather. In such a journey, there is no promise of land. There is only the horizon, the ceaseless sea, and the hope that the gods will not turn against you. The Viking Age was an era of movement, but also of risk. Their ships carried them farther than most peoples of their time, westward to the coasts of Britain, Ireland, and Iceland, southward to the rich markets of Byzantium, and eastward deep into the rivers of Russia. These journeys brought wealth, stories, and power, yet each voyage was a gamble. There were no accurate maps, no compasses, no safe harbors marked upon charts. Navigation was a skill woven from memory, from the reading of stars, the color of the sea, the flight of birds, and the shape of waves. A mistake could send a ship far off course into waters where no help could come. Storms struck without warning, swallowing ships whole. A single wave could capsize a longship, scattering men and cargo alike into the cold, merciless depths. Even calm seas carried danger sickness spreading through the crew, supplies running short, or sails torn beyond repair. For every successful raid or settlement, there were others who vanished, their names remembered only in whispers. The sagas tell of bold discoveries, but behind them lie untold losses, families waiting in vain for those who would never return. To survive as a Viking sailor was to accept the sea's indifference. It offered riches, adventure, and the lure of distant lands, but at any moment it could claim everything. And so, the longship's leak and daring though it was, became both a vessel of hope and a coffin of wood upon the restless waves. The fire crackles low in the longhouse. Smoke drifts upward, stinging your eyes as it weaves through the beams of the roof. Men and women gather around the hearth, their faces flickering in the orange light. A skald raises his voice in chant, weaving words that carry both warning and comfort. You listen as he speaks of Odin, the Allfather, who gave up an eye to drink from the well of wisdom. You hear of Thor, the hammer-wielder, protector of humankind, his strength the bulwark against giants and chaos. Every story has that hint of Ragnarok, the end of the gods, when everything burns and even the strongest fall. In this world, the gods are not distant abstractions. They are present in the storm that batters your roof, in the raven circling above the fields, in the outcome of every raid or harvest. To live as a Viking is to live in constant dialogue with these unseen forces. You feel the weight of ritual in daily life. Before sailing, sacrifices are offered. Before battle, omens are read. The bleating of goats, the hiss of fire, the murmur of prayers all remind you that life is fragile and the gods must be honored if you are to see another day. Yet there is no promise of peace, not even in death. You imagine falling in battle, shield splintered, sword heavy in your hand. If the gods favor you, Valkyries may lift you from the field, carrying you to Valhalla, where feasts and endless combat await until Ragnarok. If not, you may wander Hell's cold realm, where the forgotten drift in silence. The thought is both a comfort and a chill. Survival in this world is not only of body, but of soul, measured against the will of gods, who are as merciless as they are mighty. The Vikings' belief system was more than mythology. It was a framework that shaped every decision, every risk, every act of courage or cruelty. Fate or word was central. Life was not seen as random, but as threads woven by the Norns, the weavers of destiny. Each person's path was fixed, though how one walked it mattered deeply. This worldview hardened the Viking spirit. To die in bed of sickness was shameful. To die in battle was honorable. Survival meant more than clinging to life, it meant leaving behind a legacy of bravery, remembered in song and story. In this sense, the struggle for survival extended beyond the individual body and into the realm of reputation, kinship, and memory. At the same time, this spiritual framework was unforgiving. Natural disasters, poor harvests, or lost voyages were often interpreted as the will of the gods. There was no sense of divine compassion as later ages would teach. Instead, the gods themselves struggled and suffered, reflecting the harshness of the world the Vikings inhabited. For the common person, rituals and sacrifices provided a fragile sense of control. Animals were slaughtered, offerings made, symbols carved into wood or stone. These acts did not guarantee safety, but they affirmed a shared belief that survival, both physical and spiritual, was tied to forces beyond human grasp. In the end, the Viking spiritual world did not promise comfort. It promised only that struggle was eternal, that courage was required, and that one's life was a small echo in the endless cycle of fate and renewal. To live as a Viking, therefore, was to survive not only hunger, battle, and storm, but also the crushing certainty that even the gods themselves were doomed. The longhouse is quiet now. The fire has burned low, and only embers remain, glowing faintly against the dark. The voices that once filled the hall with story and song have faded into silence. Outside, the wind whispers across the frozen earth, rattling the wooden beams, as though reminding you that even in stillness, the world remains harsh and unyielding. You have walked through every corner of the Viking life. You have risen at dawn to labor in the fields and felt the cold bite of the sea spray upon your face. You have endured hunger, sickness, and the weight of constant uncertainty. You have boarded longships bound for distant shores, where danger lurked not only in enemy warriors, but in the merciless expanse of the ocean itself. You have seen the shadow of famine, the hardships of family life, the fleeting moments of laughter and feasting, and the solemn weight of ritual before gods who offered no mercy, only destiny. And through it all, one truth remains constant. Survival in the Viking world was never guaranteed. Every day was a negotiation with nature, with fate, with hunger and fear. To live was to fight for breath, and for memory, to cling not only to existence, but to the fragile. Hope that one's name would not be forgotten. Now, as you sit in the quiet of this imagined past, compare it to your present. Around you, walls are strong, food is plentiful, warmth is steady. There are no storms to sink your home, no raiding party approaching at dawn. The world you inhabit is softer, quieter, kinder than the one the Vikings knew. And perhaps, in that contrast, there is comfort. The Viking world demanded more than most of us could endure. And so the question lingers gently. Could you have survived it? Could any of us? The answer, quietly, is no. Not as we are. Not with the comforts we now expect. And perhaps that is why the Viking Age remains both awe-inspiring and unreachable, a time so far removed, yet so deeply human in its struggles. As the last embers fade, let your mind drift. Let the weight of the past fall away, replaced by the stillness of now. You are safe, warm, and alive in a world that no longer demands such constant struggle. The Vikings endured their time. You endure yours, and in this moment you need endure nothing more than rest. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, let the longhouse fade, and let sleep, like a calm sea, carry you gently away.